Let me ask you something that might sting a little. When was the last time you went an entire hour without your own brain working against you? Not your circumstances, not the people around you, not the economy, your inbox, the slow driver in the fast lane, or the bill that showed up at exactly the wrong time. Your brain. The thing that's supposed to be on your side. The thing narrating your entire existence from the moment your alarm goes off to the moment you finally pass out at night. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that most self-help content is too polished to say directly. The majority of human suffering isn't caused by what actually happens. It's caused by what an untrained mind does with what happens. And an untrained mind is not a neutral thing. It doesn't just leave you slightly below your potential. It actively generates suffering out of situations that don't deserve it. It takes a minor inconvenience and builds it into evidence of a pattern. It takes one person's bad mood and turns it into a verdict about your worth. It takes an uncertain future and converts it overnight into full-body dread about things that haven't happened and statistically probably won't. And the most disorienting part of all of this, you don't notice it happening in real time. The thoughts just arrive, fully formed, completely convincing, and you follow them. Straight into anxiety, straight into resentment, straight into that flat, hollow numbness that you've slowly started mistaking for calm. That's not calm, that's exhaustion. That's what happens when a mind runs wild for long enough that you stop fighting it and start calling it your personality. Here's what I want to set up before we go any further into this, because it matters. Marcus Aurelius was simultaneously the most powerful man alive and one of the most burdened. He ruled an empire of 60 million people while managing military campaigns that never seemed to end, watching his children die one by one, dealing with a co-emperor who undermined him, and carrying the weight of knowing that every decision he made would ripple across millions of lives. And yet, if you read what he wrote privately, in the journal he never intended anyone to see, you find a man of extraordinary internal steadiness, not because his life was easy, because his mind was trained. Epictetus started his life as a slave, owned, literally owned by another human being. His master reportedly once twisted his leg to test whether Epictetus would break. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "You're going to break it." It broke. He said, "I told you so." He walked with a limp for the rest of his life, and spent that life teaching some of the most profound philosophy about human freedom ever recorded. Because he understood something most free people never grasp, that the only freedom which cannot be taken from you is what you choose to think. Seneca was a wealthy statesman, a playwright, a philosopher, and a political target. He survived exile. He survived multiple emperors who wanted him dead. He was eventually ordered to take his own life by Nero, and by all historical accounts he did so with composure. Not because he had no fear, because he had spent decades training himself to face the thing he feared. These three men were not born enlightened. They were not operating with some rare neurological gift the rest of us don't have access to. What they had was a system. Daily, repeatable, deliberately practiced habits that gradually rewired the way their minds processed reality, not by changing what happened to them, but by changing what happened inside them in response. 6 habits. That's what this is about.
6 specific practical disciplines arranged in ascending order of depth and psychological demand, starting where you can actually begin tomorrow morning and building toward the one that most people either ignore or skim past, the one that sounds the darkest but is actually the most clarifying thing a human being can do for themselves. These are not motivational concepts. Motivation is a sugar rush.
It feels extraordinary for about 48 hours and then evaporates the moment life gets actually difficult, which is exactly when you need it most. What the Stoics built were habits. Things that work not because you feel inspired, but because you've practiced them enough that they become the default way your mind operates under pressure. If that's what you're here for, real mental discipline, not just a feeling, then subscribe right now and turn notifications on, because this channel exists for exactly this kind of work. Now let's get into it. The first battle of every single day doesn't happen in a meeting room, on a highway, or in any conversation with another human being. It happens in a window of somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes, immediately after you open your eyes, before you've spoken a word or made a single decision. That is the most psychologically vulnerable window of your entire day. And for most people, the untrained mind runs its first and most destructive program during exactly that window. You know what it looks like. The alarm goes off. Before you've even fully surfaced from sleep, your brain starts running inventory. What went wrong yesterday? What's due today? What could go sideways this week? Then the phone comes out and the scroll begins, and now you're also processing whatever the internet decided was important enough to manufacture outrage about overnight. And by the time you're standing in the shower, you're already behind, already low, already operating from a deficit, not because anything has actually happened yet, but because you handed the first 15 minutes of your day to chaos and called it a morning routine. Marcus Aurelius made a different choice. Every morning, before the empire reached him, he would sit with one deliberate and specific thought. Something like, "Today I will encounter people who are difficult, ungrateful, dishonest, and frustrating. And that's fine, because I know why. They don't have what I have. And knowing that, I won't be surprised, I won't be derailed, and I won't take it personally." He wasn't being arrogant. He was being prepared. He was drawing a boundary around his internal state before the external world had a chance to storm it. Here's how you apply the same principle without needing to rule anything. Tomorrow morning, before your hand moves toward your phone, give yourself 60 seconds. Sit up. Plant your feet on the floor. Ask yourself one honest question. What do I actually control today? The answer is always the same, and it will never change regardless of your job title, your relationship status, your bank balance, or your circumstances. You control your attention, your reactions, and your effort. That's the list. Everything outside of that list is weather. You can notice it, you can respond to it, but you cannot control it. And trying to is where most suffering begins. After that, spend 30 seconds mentally walking through the day ahead. Not with anxiety, not running worst-case scenarios, with the calm posture of someone who has already decided how they're going to show up, regardless of what comes. Difficult conversation on the schedule? You've already chosen to stay grounded in it. A task you've been dreading? You've already committed to starting it without negotiating with yourself. Something unexpected goes wrong, and something always does. You've already accepted that the obstacle is not proof that the day is ruined. Your response to the obstacle will determine that, not the obstacle itself. The Stoics called this premeditation of the day, and it sounds more sophisticated than it is. You're simply refusing in advance to be ambushed by the reality that life pushes back. You're a pilot running pre-flight checks, not because you expect the plane to crash, but because preparation is what makes you calm when turbulence hits. 1 minute. That's all this costs. And the return on that 1 minute, compounded daily, is a fundamentally different relationship with your own mind. Now, before we go to the second habit, I want you to answer something honestly in the comments. Have you ever said something in anger that you immediately regretted, or spiraled into anxiety over something that turned out to be completely fine? Drop it below, because what you just recalled is the exact problem that habit 2 exists to solve. There is a gap between what happens to you and how you respond to it. A tiny, almost invisible space of pure psychological potential. And in most people, most of the time, that gap is essentially zero. Something happens. The reaction fires, instantly, automatically, and the reaction is almost never the response they would have chosen if they'd had a moment to think. Epictetus placed this at the absolute center of his philosophy. We are not disturbed by what happens to us, he taught. We are disturbed by the interpretation. Our mind immediately assigns to what happens to us. Someone criticizes your work. The event itself is neutral. Sound waves, words, information. Your mind's instant verdict. They think I'm incompetent. I'm being undermined. I'm not good enough. That's where the suffering actually originates. And the vicious part is that the verdict arrives so fast, it feels like objective reality rather than a split-second judgment your untrained mind just invented. But here's the opening. That judgment, however fast it arrives, is a habit. And habits can be interrupted. What you need is a pattern interrupt. Something simple enough to actually use in real time, under real pressure, when your nervous system is already spiking. The technique has 3 steps, and the whole thing takes about 8 seconds. First, name what you're feeling with specificity. Not, "I'm stressed," because that's too vague to work with. "I'm feeling dismissed. I'm feeling humiliated. I'm feeling afraid that I'm not enough." The more precise the label, the more distance it creates between you and the emotion. You're no longer inside it, you're observing it. Second, 1 breath. Not a meditation session, not a breathing exercise. 1 slow, deliberate inhale and exhale. That's it. The physiological effect is real and immediate. It interrupts the stress response just long enough to create space. Third, 1 question. Will reacting right now actually help me, or will it cost me something? Name it. Breathe. Question it. Viktor Frankl, psychologist, Holocaust survivor, and one of the clearest thinkers of the 20th century, wrote that between every stimulus and every response there is a space, and in that space lies human freedom. The Stoics built their entire practice around locating that space and deliberately expanding it day by day until responding thoughtfully became more natural than reacting impulsively. You've already set your morning intention. This habit is how you protect it when life shows up and tests it, which it will, every single day. Now we go somewhere most people unconsciously avoid, and the avoidance is the problem. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most comfortable men in Rome, had a practice that sounds, at first, like it belongs to someone with a deeply troubling relationship with happiness. Regularly and deliberately, he would sit with the thought of losing what he valued most. His fortune gone, his reputation destroyed, his health deteriorating, the people he loved absent. He didn't do this to suffer. He didn't do this out of pessimism or some philosophical performance. He did it for 2 reasons that, once you understand them, are completely logical. The first is preparation. When you have never mentally rehearsed the possibility of a specific loss, and that loss arrives anyway, as losses do, you are hit by both the event and the shock of it simultaneously. You're not just dealing with the thing that happened, you're dealing with the disbelief that it happened at all. That disbelief is what paralyzes people. Negative visualization removes the shock from the equation, not the pain, the shock. And that's enough to let you function, adapt, and move when otherwise you'd freeze. The second reason is arguably more immediately valuable for most people. It creates genuine gratitude that no motivational poster has ever been able to manufacture. When you sit quietly and honestly imagine your life without your health, specifically the ability to walk, to breathe without effort, to wake up without pain, and then you open your eyes and those things are still there, something shifts. Not dramatically, quietly. The ordinary becomes luminous for a moment. You stop scrolling past your actual life. The practice is 2 minutes, once a day. Pick something real, a relationship, your financial stability, your physical ability, your independence. Imagine it genuinely gone. Don't catastrophize. Don't spiral. Just sit with it honestly and ask, how would I handle this? What is actually within my control if this happened? You're not summoning disaster. You're proving to yourself, repeatedly, in small doses, that you have more capacity to endure than your comfort has been letting you discover. This one demands more courage than the first 2 habits. You are deliberately walking your mind toward something uncomfortable instead of away from it. But that courage, that willingness to face hard things on your own terms, compounds over time into a kind of psychological durability that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or faked. And that durability is exactly what the 4th habit sharpens. Here's another question I want you to sit with. Genuinely sit with it and leave your answer below. What is one thing in your life right now that you know you're taking for granted? Just name it. Something you desperately miss if it were suddenly gone, but that you barely noticed today. Because naming it is already the beginning of something. Seneca closed every day with a ritual that looked simple from the outside and was profound from the inside. Before sleep, he reviewed the day, not the way most people involuntarily replay their worst moments before trying to sleep, but methodically and without self-punishment. Where did I show up as the person I want to be? Where did I fall short? What specifically would I do differently tomorrow? He approached himself the way a good coach approaches a developing athlete. Honestly, constructively, with the goal of improvement rather than shame. Most people end the day exactly the way they started it. Reactive, scattered, half present. The stress of the day doesn't get processed. It accumulates, like sediment building up in a pipe. They carry it into sleep, wake up already heavy with yesterday's unresolved weight, add today's on top of it, and gradually begin to assume that the way they feel is just their baseline. It isn't. It's the cost of never creating a moment of genuine, honest self-reflection. 5 minutes before bed. 3 questions. That's the entire practice. First, where did I respond well today? This isn't an exercise in vanity. Your brain learns and reinforces what you pay conscious attention to. If you only review what went wrong, you train your mind to find more of what went wrong. Acknowledging what you did right isn't ego, it's calibration. Second, where did I react in a way that didn't reflect who I want to be? No softening, no rationalization, specific and honest. Not, I had a hard day, but I snapped at that person when I was frustrated and I didn't need to. The specificity is what makes it useful rather than just uncomfortable. Third, what is one concrete behavior I'll do differently tomorrow? Not a vague intention like I'll be calmer. A specific, actionable choice. Tomorrow when I feel that particular frustration starting to build, I'll use the pause before I say anything. Your morning ritual sets the intention. This reflection corrects the course. Together, they create a closed loop. A feedback system that means every day, however imperfect, teaches you something and makes the next one slightly better. Over months, that compound effect is staggering. You stop drifting through your own life and start navigating it deliberately. Now the 5th habit. This is where many people quietly decide the Stoics were probably just a bit too intense. Seneca was wealthy beyond most people's imagination. Roman senatorial class wealthy. Multiple homes, servants, financial security that most people alive today will never come close to. And periodically, deliberately, he would strip that comfort away. Sleep on a hard surface, eat plain, austere food, wear rough clothing. For days at a time, he would live as if the fortune had vanished, not as a punishment, not to prove a point to anyone. To answer one private question, if I lost all of this, would I collapse, or would I be okay? By regularly experiencing the thing he feared losing, he neutralized the fear's power over him. And this is the principle underneath the habit. Comfort, when it is constant and never interrupted, does not make you stronger. It quietly lowers your tolerance for difficulty until every inconvenience registers as a crisis. Every frustration becomes disproportionately unbearable. You become, without ever consciously choosing it, dependent on your external conditions to maintain your internal state, which means your peace is always hostage to circumstances outside your control. Voluntary discomfort reverses that dependency in a way that nothing else can. Not dramatically, not masochistically, practically. A cold shower you genuinely don't want to take, but you take it anyway, and you stay in it, and you realize nothing actually broke. A meal you skip to remind yourself that hunger is an uncomfortable sensation, not an emergency. 30 minutes of sitting without your phone and without filling the silence with anything, just being present to the discomfort of stillness until it stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like clarity. Physical exercise pushed just past the point where your body starts negotiating. Every time you do this, you're making the same deposit into the same account. A growing, private body of evidence that you are more capable of handling difficulty than your comfortable life has been showing you. That evidence changes you. Not loudly, quietly. You stop flinching at things that used to rattle you. You stop avoiding discomfort reflexively and start choosing it strategically. You become, gradually and genuinely, harder to shake. This habit is 5th in the sequence because it genuinely requires the others underneath it. You need the morning clarity to choose it intentionally. You need the pause so you don't talk yourself out of it in the moment. You need the visualization so you understand why you're doing it. You need the evening reflection to track what it's actually doing to you over time. But once you start, Once you feel what it's like to prove to yourself, repeatedly and physically, that you can handle hard things, something in you settles. A quiet confidence that doesn't need outside validation because it was built entirely from the inside. That foundation is what makes the sixth habit possible. And the sixth is the one that changes the weight of everything else. Marcus Aurelius kept a skull on his desk, not decoratively, not dramatically, as a daily deliberate reminder of the one fact that cuts through every trivial worry, every petty grudge, every moment wasted on things that ultimately mean nothing. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. He wrote it plainly, without poetry or softening. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not eventually, in some far-off abstract future when you're old and have run out of delay. Now, today, the meeting you're dreading, the message you've been putting off sending, the person you've been meaning to call, the work you've been waiting for better conditions to begin. All of that exists inside a window of time that has a definite end point, and you don't know where that point is. We have built elaborate cultural systems for avoiding this thought. Entertainment, busyness, distraction, the comfortable assumption that there's always more time. And the cost of that avoidance isn't just philosophical. It's practical and daily. We treat trivial frustrations like genuine emergencies and real opportunities like things we'll pursue eventually. We maintain grudges for years that would dissolve in seconds if we genuinely remembered time was limited. We postpone the things that matter most until the conditions are perfect, and the conditions are never perfect, and the years pass. Seneca wrote that we should prepare our minds as if we had arrived at the very end of our lives, not to become morbid, but to become awake, to stop treating today as a rough draft, to stop living as if there will always be a better version of this moment available later. The practice is one sentence, added quietly to the end of your morning ritual. I might not see tomorrow, not with fear, with precision. Then ask yourself, if this were genuinely my last day with this particular person, would I spend it in resentment toward them? If this were my last chance to do this particular work, would I do it carelessly? If this were the only hour I had left with myself, would I waste it on distraction or self-punishment? The answer comes immediately every time, and it changes what you do next. This habit does not exist alongside the other 5 as a peer. It sits beneath them and amplifies every single one. It makes your morning intention feel sacred rather than optional. It makes the pause feel essential rather than effortful. It makes the negative visualization practice feel honest rather than morbid. It makes the evening reflection something you take seriously because you understand these days are not drafts, they are the thing itself. Mortality awareness is not depression. It is the opposite of numbness. It is the most powerful focusing tool human beings have ever developed, and the Stoics understood that avoiding it doesn't protect you from death. It just ensures you arrive there having wasted your life pretending it wasn't coming. So here's what this looks like when all 6 habits are functioning together. Not as a list of techniques, but as a single integrated system, running daily, quietly rewiring everything. You wake up tomorrow. Nothing external has changed. Same job, same challenges, same people, same pile of responsibilities, same complicated parts of your life that don't have easy solutions. But before any of it reaches you, you take 60 seconds. You sit up and you ask what you control. You walk through the day ahead with readiness instead of dread. You've already decided who you're going to be inside whatever happens today. Then life begins, and something happens that used to derail you instantly. A frustrating interaction, unexpected news, a plan falling apart. But now there's a gap. You feel the surge, you name it, you breathe once, you choose. The response that comes out of you is genuinely yours, not the automatic firing of a nervous system that was never taught to pause. Throughout the day, nothing shocks you into paralysis because you've already quietly rehearsed the ways things might not go perfectly. When a real setback arrives, your mind moves immediately to what you can actually do from where you are, rather than spinning in disbelief about the fact that something went wrong. You find moments during the day, and they exist if you look for them, to deliberately choose the slightly harder option over the comfortable one. The cold at the beginning of the shower, the walk instead of the elevator, the silence instead of the background noise. Small deposits consistently made. The evening comes. You sit with yourself for 5 minutes, not to judge, but to learn. You see clearly what you did well and what you change. You make one specific decision for tomorrow. You close the loop. And beneath all of it, quiet but constant, runs the awareness that this, all of it, is genuinely finite. Which means the morning mattered, the pause mattered, the discomfort you chose mattered, the reflection mattered. Nothing was wasted because you were present for it and you lived it like it counted. That is what a trained mind looks like. Not superhuman, not free from difficulty, frustration, or loss. Free from being controlled by those things. Free from being defined by them. The Stoics were not extraordinary people born with rare gifts. Marcus Aurelius dealt with anxiety and self-doubt throughout his life. His journal proves it. Seneca was temperamental, inconsistent, and by his own admission often fell short of his own philosophy. Epictetus couldn't change a single physical circumstance of his life. What made them different was one decision, made repeatedly every single day, to train the one thing they actually owned, rather than spend their lives trying to control everything they didn't. Your mind is untrained right now. That's not a criticism, it's just the starting point. It doesn't have to stay that way. These 6 habits, practiced in sequence, each one building on the last, create a compound effect that is genuinely difficult to describe from the outside and undeniable from the inside. You don't just get incrementally better at handling hard moments. You become someone that hard moments cannot easily break. And that transformation, quiet, non-dramatic, entirely your own, starts tomorrow morning. 60 seconds. Edge of the bed. One question. If you're committed to actually doing this, not just watching it, not just feeling inspired for the afternoon before returning to exactly who you were, then subscribe and stay close. Because this channel goes deeper from here. This was the foundation. There's a great deal more to build. And if you're ready to begin, if something in this landed, and you're done with the version of yourself that lets the untrained mind run the show, leave one comment below. My mind, my control. See you in the next one. Stay unshaken.